Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of PTR Perspective. In today's episode, we will talk about high voltage switchgear in the Middle East region, specifically defined as the switchgear that gets used in transmission and subtransmission levels higher than medium voltage levels at 42 kilovolts. Today, we'll talk about the underlying demand drivers of high voltage switchgear in the Middle East region, as well as talk about SF6 alternatives in GIS and the adoption of those, how that might look like for OEMs and from a demand perspective here in the GCC. For this episode, I have with me Saad Habib, who's our lead analyst on high voltage switchgear at PTR, who will share his insights on the topic. Welcome, Saad, to the episode.
Hi, Hassan. Thank you for inviting me to this episode of PTR Perspective.
Perfect. Let's jump right into it. From your research, what are the key markets for high voltage switchgear in the Middle Eastern region? And then we listen a lot about the large infrastructure projects, ambitious renewable energy goals. Could you also give a flavor of how are these infrastructure projects, large renewable energy goals, electrification investments, how these things are shaping the demand of high voltage switchgear in the region?
So, Hassan, in the Middle Eastern region, the key marketplaces for the high voltage equipments are Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, and Qatar and Oman. So all these are experiencing a robust growth in the infrastructure projects, in the renewable energy investments, in the electrification initiatives, and major undertakings like the smart cities and industrial developments. All these require a dependable and robust electrical systems, which ultimately is driving the demand for the high voltage switchgear. And not just that, moreover, the Middle Eastern push for the renewable energy, particularly in the solar and wind power, necessitates the advanced switchgear solution, and electrification efforts also requires to modernize the power grid. And all these are actually increasing the demand for the high voltage switchgear equipment as well. Following COP28, the Middle East have announced to triple its renewable energy targets by 2030, and Saudi Arabia is leading the way, and they have actually announced to incorporate almost 20 gigawatts of renewable energy sources annually, aiming to reach almost 130 gigawatts by 2030. If I just quickly highlight some of the key uh, gigawatt additions or targets that countries have set in the Middle East region. So Saudi Arabia planned 130 gigawatts of renewable energies to be reached by 2030. Similarly, UAE is targeting to invest and incorporate 20 gigawatts by 2030. Kuwait is targeting to include 4.5 gigawatts. Oman is targeting to include 2.6 gigawatts, and Qatar is targeting to include 2 gigawatts of renewable energy in the GCC region and in their renewable energy mix. Other than that, electric vehicle infrastructure in the Middle East is also growing substantially and will continue to grow in this decade. The rising electrification of transportation is predicted to increase grid loads, which ultimately necessitates the advancement in the grid systems that is going to drive the demand for the high voltage switchgear equipment. According to some stats, the Public Investment Fund (PIF) in Saudi Arabia is targeting to invest 700 billion sovereign wealth fund, and it has a goal to produce almost 500,000 vehicles to be on the roads by 2030. And they have increased this target from 150,000 vehicles, which was previously set in 2026. Also, in the recent report, DEVA has mentioned that they have seen nearly 51% increase in electric vehicles that are coming in the road between 2022 till 2023. So, given all these initiatives and all these investments and targets, the Middle Eastern market, particularly in the high voltage switchgear segment, is expected to experience a robust growth. Um, amid, you can say a moderate growth in the AIS air insulated segment, but a good cumulative growth of 9.5% in the gas insulated technology by 2030. And between all these initiatives and plans and uh, targets, the utility sector is going to dominate the demand for the high voltage switchgear, given that
Mhm,
they are heavily investing in the
mhm.
transmission and distribution projects.
Perfect. Which makes sense, right? A lot of infrastructure projects, renewable, these two are the major drivers of demand as well. So utilities need to be installing a lot of the equipment to evacuate the power and then also to distribute the power as well. Um, Talking about renewables and environmentally friendly technologies, and you said GIS is the one which is going to be the dominant kind of growth driver of high voltage switchgear in the region. Let's talk about SF6 alternatives, right? As we see globally, there is a push towards not using SF6 in high voltage switchgear as well. It has been the case in medium voltage switchgear for some time, but now there is increasingly we see that on the high voltage side as well. Can you talk about how is the global transition towards SF6 free switchgear progressing? And how are the suppliers or what we call OEMs responding to this kind of technology evolution? And then we'll jump into what's the impact on the Middle East region as well. But if you can please paint the picture on what's the global progress right now on SF6 free switchgear?
Yeah. So globally, we have seen that the non-SF6 based high voltage and medium voltage switchgears are gaining traction, particularly after the year of 2020, 2021, like post-COVID. We have seen that as all the countries are focusing towards a sustainable future, I would say they started to focus in the sustainable switchgear as well. And when it comes to the sustainability and switchgear, SF6 gas is highly potent and is totally not suitable for the environment. It's almost like 23,000 times more potent than the carbon dioxide. So, uh, in the overall world, there has been a shift and there is a transition towards the non-SF6 based high voltage equipment, particularly if we see the European region with its 2024 regulation mandates a gradual phase down of fluorinated gases, F gases, and aiming to reduce their use by 79% as compared to the 2015 levels. And they are estimating that with this phase out of SF6 gas, Europe can reduce the emission equivalent to the approximately equivalent to the 1.4 million tons of carbon dioxide annually. And a complete ban on the SF6 in the medium voltage switchgear segment is expected by 2030. And for high voltage category, the use of SF6 is banned for up to voltage range of 145 kV by 2028, and with a complete ban on all voltage levels uh, on the SF6 products by 2032. So after this mandate and this regulation, major European OEMs, including General Electric, Hitachi Energy, and Siemens, came into action, and they have started developing their portfolios, product lines in the non-SF6 based solutions, particularly G-Cube. Uh, is produced by the General Electric has been versatile and quite reliable in the non-SF6 based high voltage equipment. And Blue GIS is also gaining traction in the European region, in the Nordic side especially. Other than that, despite Europe is focusing and actually moving towards renewable energy, towards the sustainable future and sustainable switchgear, USA is falling behind, and California Air Resource Board CARBs has been instrumental in this movement, and they have also implemented regulations around the SF6 gas on reducing the usage of SF6 gas, particularly PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric Company, which is a prominent utility in the California, is supporting this CARB's effort in phasing out. the SF6 gas from the electrical equipment. And recently, New York has also set a retirement timeline for SF6 equipment and ban on acquisition of after a designated phase-out dates, and which is going to be started in the 2025. And owners of SF6 gas-insulated equipment after that will required to be maintain an inventory of the equipment, and phase down will occur
Mhm.
by expected to be occur by 2033. So that's how actually world is responding. And the question lies here is why not? Like if we are moving towards a sustainable future, if we are moving towards green energy sources, to, putting a lot of efforts in the decarbonization, so why not a sustainable switchgear as well?
Interesting. So what you're saying is that across the globe, there is developments in the US on the West Coast. We are seeing PG&E coming to action, and then of course we have the manufacturer GE from the US, of course, very international player with a big presence in Europe as well. They have their G Cube since quite a while now. Then we have Hitachi Energy and Siemens Energy, both of them with their SF6 alternatives as well on the high voltage switchgear side, which are kind of aiming towards the ban roughly by the end of the decade on this equipment. Um, there's very interesting dynamics to that as well, right? Like what that essentially means is that these manufacturers will have to choose whether to have assembly lines for SF6 alternatives versus do you have assembly lines for SF6 base HVGIS, something that we were talking about before the episode. Um, when do you think this change will happen within the Middle Eastern region as well, right? From going from SF6 based GIS to the alternatives to SF6. And in that paradigm, what are the opportunities for local and international players, right? So local players who are thinking about local markets and then manufacturing here, but then also there's a lot of import happening, especially on the HV switchgear side in the region. So what are the opportunities or even the challenges for the OEMs when they think about this region particularly?
Hmm. Uh, in the Middle Eastern region, like GIS has been a preferred solution, and this trend has been like since decades and is going to be followed in the upcoming future as well. Particularly if I talk about the Saudi Arabia, so Saudi Arabian market dominates 90% share of the GIS dominates in Saudi Arabian market by 90% in the mid high voltage switchgear market. So also as you're mentioning that there will be an opportunity for the local players and for the international players. And as they are having a huge installed base of gas insulated switchgear, it is very likely that in the near future, um, Middle East, Middle Eastern market, particularly countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, and Oman, are going to adopt the non-SF6 based high voltage switchgear equipment as well. Uh,
Mhm,
one of the leading, or you can say major reason for that is that there is a good amount of share for the international and European players like Hitachi, Siemens, and GE holds a substantial
mhm,
share in the market in the high voltage category particularly. And Hitachi's Dammam facility, we all know that is already approved and is approved by the SEC, SABIC, and SWCC.
mhm,
Oh, other than that, uh, Hitachi Energy, Siemens, GE are actually contributing a good share in the market in the high voltage switchgear for decades, and is very likely that they are going to be a leading market players in the region as well. Uh,
mhm,
yeah, but despite there is no regulation around SF6, we have seen that Alfanar, which is a local player and headquartered in Riyadh, has played a substantial role in adopting the non-SF6 based switchgear. And currently, they have
mhm,
with the efforts of their dedicated research team, they have developed SF6 based dry air ring main unit (RMU) at medium voltage level,
mhm,
particularly for the market of Saudi Arabia. So
mhm,
there is a likely chance that in the middle of this huge demand across the globe, that as Middle Eastern region will adopt the non-SF6 based switchgear, as
mhm.
one of the major reason is that the OEMs are facing uh, significant hurdles in maintaining different product lines. We have been into
Hmm.
we have been into the lot of we have been in talks with a lot of OEMs across the globe, and they all are on the same page that it's quite not possible for us to maintain two production lines, particularly at the same time, one for the SF6 based high voltage equipment and other for the non SF6 high voltage equipment switchgear, uh, because of the fact that the lead times are quite high, the demand is quite huge. They have to shift from one production line to other in the near future, and this will ultimately necessitates that the Middle Eastern region will also adopt the non-SF6 based high voltage equipment.
Very interesting. I think one of the things that I've realized in the region is that, specifically GCC is very open to adopting new technologies. So I do agree with you that, the moment this shift starts to happen globally at a higher pace, like I think GCC will very likely adopt as well. And as you said, there's no reason not to, right? If the reliability of the solution is equally as good as the SF6 based ones, then why not go for a technology which is more environmentally friendly? And then also, I think the players, as you mentioned, are already thinking about the alternatives in the region. So that could be an opportunity for companies to partner up from a technology perspective to manufacture more high voltage SF6 alternatives here. But then also, thinking about companies like Noventura, right, that supply these solutions white labeled to be integrated into your switchgear. Very interesting. I think we mixed a little bit of HV switchgear and medium voltage switchgear in the discussion because we see this transition going from medium voltage towards high voltage in terms of the regulations around this equipment. But overall, we do believe that by the end of the decade, there's going to be a significant push towards SF6 alternatives in high voltage switchgear as well. Thank you so much, Saad, for your insights today. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening in. As usual, if you have any questions, feel free to comment, reach out to me or Saad directly. We're happy to answer or continue the discussion on this topic with you guys offline as well. Take care, and we'll welcome you back to another episode very soon.
Thank you.